Okay, so there's this topic bubbling up in the US that's, well, it's really charged. It's called FBA delineation. Basically, it's this push to formally separate foundational Black Americans from, say, Black immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa. Now, if you ask supporters, they'll tell you this is all about justice, about recognizing a unique lineage. But critics, they see it as something that could just create a whole lot of division within Black communities.
So let's just cut right through all the noise, right? The real question behind all of this is pretty simple. Does this whole FBA delineation thing actually change anything? I mean, does it have any real-world impact economically, politically, or socially? That's exactly what we're going to break down right here.
All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the basics. We have to understand the core idea. Like, what is FBA delineation anyway? So, when you hear that term, foundational Black Americans, or FBA, it's talking about a very specific group. We're talking about the descendants of enslaved Africans right here in the US. These are people whose ancestors were living, fighting, and laboring on American soil for centuries. I mean, we're talking way before the Civil Rights Act, before emancipation, even before the United States was officially a country.
Okay, and here's the crucial point. The whole idea behind the movement is that this specific lineage, it should be recognized as a distinct ethnic group in the eyes of the law and in policy. You know, kind of like how other groups are already recognized. Think about it this way. After Japanese Americans were interned during World War II, they were eventually able to seek redress, right? And a big reason why is because they were a legally defined group that had suffered a specific, documented harm.
In this quote, it really gets to the absolute heart of what's driving this movement. The whole argument is that the historical damage and the debt that's owed because of it is specific to this lineage. So from their perspective, just lumping all Black people together into one big category, well, that completely misses the point and hides that critical distinction.
Okay, so that's the what of it. Now let's get into the why, and really the biggest reason behind this whole push for delineation. It boils down to one word: reparations.
To really get the reparations connection, you kind of have to think like a lawyer for a second. See, for any kind of reparations program to even get off the ground, a government needs to check 3 boxes. First, you need a clearly defined group. Second, you need to prove there was historical harm. And third, you have to establish a legal class of people who would benefit. But without that very first step, a clearly defined group, the whole thing just stops. It stalls out. So from this point of view, delineation isn't just an idea, it's the essential first step.
Okay, I get it. That all makes sense for some potential future. But it brings up a really important question for right here, right now. What are the actual, tangible economic benefits of having an FBA status today? Like, what do you get?
And the answer? Well, it might actually surprise you. It's zero. A big, fat zero. As of right now, there is no law, no federal program, not a single economic payout that is directly tied to an FBA status.
So then why the big push, right? It's because this is a long game. The whole strategy is about laying the legal groundwork, setting the stage for a future where a serious national conversation about reparations could actually happen. It's all about building the case for tomorrow, not today.
All right, let's pivot a little bit. We've talked about the potential economic future, so let's shift to the very real political present. Because right now, the impact of this whole movement is, let's be honest, mostly symbolic. And that symbolism, it carries both a huge promise and a pretty significant risk.
So, on the one hand, you've got the promise. Supporters see massive potential here. They argue that delineation could create stronger, more unified FBA voting blocs that could force politicians to finally focus on FBA-specific issues. But, on the other hand, the risk is real. Critics are seriously worried that this could just fragment the broader Black community, slicing up that coalition power. And if that happens, it could create all this internal conflict that, let's face it, political opponents would love to exploit. It's a classic divide-and-conquer scenario that could really weaken the community's collective voice.
All right, and this brings us to, well, to what is easily the most controversial, most heated piece of this entire debate, the impact this all has on Black immigrants, specifically those from the Caribbean and Africa. The central point of tension, when you get right down to it, often boils down to one single direct question. Does this movement actually cause tangible economic harm to Black people who have immigrated to the U.S.?
And if we're just looking at the economic research that's out there, the answer is a pretty clear no.
there's simply no evidence that the FBA movement itself creates any kind of legal or economic barriers for Black immigrants when it comes to things like getting hired, finding housing, or starting a business.
But this is where we really have to separate the cold, hard data from the real, messy social dynamics. Because while the economic numbers show that Black immigrants aren't negatively impacting FBA wages or jobs, the social friction, oh, that is undeniable. This push for delineation can create feelings of suspicion, it creates cultural distance, and it often fuels a lot of hostility online. And all of that leads to this feeling that people are being pushed out of what they see as Black American spaces. So the conflict here, it's really cultural, not financial.
Okay, so we've looked at the legal arguments, the political risks, and all that social friction. Let's try to pull this all together. Who, if anyone, actually stands to benefit from all this?
Well, proponents will tell you that 3 different groups could actually benefit. First off, foundational Black Americans. They would gain that stronger legal foundation for any future reparations claims. Second, you have immigrants. They get more clarity. It reinforces the idea that Black American isn't just one single thing, and it helps them preserve their own unique cultural identities. And finally, you have policymakers. They could actually get more accurate data. See, when you lump all Black groups together, the success of some immigrant communities can accidentally hide the really deep, persistent economic gaps that FBAs are facing. So better data could mean better, more targeted policies to fix those specific inequalities.
But here's the thing, this is really the make or break point. For delineation to have any kind of lasting, real-world impact, it has to grow beyond being a cultural movement that's mostly fueled by online debate. It has to become a concrete legislative blueprint. And that, right there, is the critical leap, from just an idea to actual, tangible policy.
And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? What is the end game here? Is this whole thing going to become a tangible policy framework that could reshape American law for the next 100 years? Or does it risk just getting bogged down and becoming another divisive identity war that's fought mostly on the internet? The answer to that question, well, that's what's going to determine its place in history.